get a picture of Brian Ross of ABC News. He joins us now from New York. He filed a great piece for Good Morning America on how the CEOs of the big three automakers flew private planes into Washington. Let's show you some of his report. Watch this.
The man boarding this $36 million private luxury jet at the Detroit airport is the CEO of General Motors, Rick Wagoner, on his way to Washington to cry poor, to tell Congress that GM is burning through cash and will fail unless taxpayers bail out the auto industry with $10 to $12 billion for GM alone.
Brian, terrific reporting. What made you jump on this?
Well, I'm always interested in how the corporate royalty live, especially when they run companies that are out of cash asking for public money. So they took their private planes to go to Washington to ask for public money. Each of the three CEOs flew into Washington, each one in a separate jet worth about $35 million. Round-trip cost Larry about $20,000. A coach seat would have been about $335. First class, $900, but first class still isn't good enough for them.
Now, you confronted them about it at their appearance on Capitol Hill. Let's watch that.
Wagoner, who was paid almost $16 million last year, wasn't eager to talk about the private jet.
Mr. Wagoner, Brian Ross, ABC News. How are you? Question for you about your private jet. About the private jet you travel in. You say you're willing to make sacrifices. What about traveling in private jets? Why do you do that?
We do absolutely limit it to urgent situations.
You got your big jet parked here? Could you not have flown commercial? Sir?
Had other meetings early this morning in Detroit, actually.
What did he say, Brian?
He said he had other meetings earlier in Detroit. There were flights we checked out of Detroit airport that would have gotten there in time for the hearing. But this is just the way he lives and the way all three of the CEOs at the auto companies live. I don't think it occurred to them that they should ever think about flying commercial. And in fact, they say that their corporate boards require them to fly for security reasons on private jets. That gives them certain tax advantages by making that a requirement. But the fact is, they talked about sacrifices. They primarily talked about the sacrifice of laying off tens of thousands of their workers, not so much their own personal sacrifice.
If they get a tax break for flying corporately, that means we're paying to fly them corporately.
There is a tax break involved if it's for security reasons, and that's what the reason they cite.
Why do they need security?
They are important men. They run big companies. I suppose they could imagine a kidnapping threat. Others say they have to be able to travel secretly to make deals that nobody sees where they're going. But the fact is, this is a nice way to travel. It's really seamless travel. The limousine or the big car takes you right up to the foot of the plane. You get on board, off you go. It's very efficient. There's no doubt about that. But for a company that says it's running out of cash, as Wagoner said about GM, it seems incongruous.
And they got some heat from lawmakers today when they testified before a House committee. Let's watch that.
I'm going to ask the three executives here to raise their hand if they flew here commercial. Let the record show no hands went up. Second, going to ask you to raise your hand if you're planning to sell your jet in place now and fly back commercial. Let the record show no hands went up.
Now, Brian, they don't see the irony of this?
Not in the least. There was no indication whatsoever that they were in any way shamed by it or bothered by it. In fact, we had crews out in Detroit tonight, and we saw the jet of the Ford CEO, Alan Mulally. It arrived, pulled into the big hangar Ford has at the Detroit airport so they could come out of the plane without being bothered by the cold weather or our cameras. And the GM big G4 Gulfstream Ford jet, a $36 million jet, is running, engines ready to go out of Dulles Airport to take Wagoner home to Detroit later tonight.
Here's part of what a GM spokesman said about all this. Making a big to-do about this when issues vital to jobs of millions of Americans are being discussed in Washington is diverting attention away from a critical debate that will determine the future health of the auto industry. What do you make of that?
Well, I think what's involved here really is the symbolism. It's not the cost of the $20,000 round trip. That's not going to make the big difference to save the company. But it does go to what one lawmaker said, the arrogance of these CEOs. And do they get it? Do they understand what's going on in the rest of the country? When you travel the way they do, you're not in long lines. You're not exposed to the average American. And maybe they don't.
Do the Japanese, the Toyota, Honda CEOs, do they fly in their own jets?
Well, that's a question that I was asked this morning by Diane Sawyer, and to be honest, we couldn't quite find the answer. But I do know that the Japanese are not in front of Congress asking for $25 billion in public money.
Now, Brian, what do you think they're going to get? What do you do with this dilemma? You bail them out?
I sat through the whole hearings yesterday and today, and it's a very tough situation, as you say, as your guests have indicated, when Michael Moore and Charlie Rangel. It's clear that there is a belief that it would be a serious blow to the economy if these companies were to go under. And Wagoner probably made the best case that he says his consumer research shows that a company that goes bankrupt, 80% of his customers would not buy a car from a company that goes bankrupt, fearing the warranty wouldn't be any good. So it's a serious, serious problem. And, you know, it's way above my pay grade as a reporter to figure out what to do about it. But I can tell you, I think this kind of symbolism and the sort of PR missteps of flying in 3 separate corporate jets to ask for money from the public just did not go over well in Congress. They had a tough fight anyway, but this certainly didn't help.
Thanks, Brian, as always. Terrific
You bet,
work.
Larry.
Brian Ross of ABC. Does Hillary Clinton have a lock on the Secretary of State's job or not? That's next.